Did you ever hear confession when you were a priest, Tom?
Confession's for humans. It's a human practice to help us deal with their shame. Confession's not for God's sake. If you want to be forgiven, all you have to do is ask.
Now, can I make a confession to you all? Because I don't know how to feel about this episode. On one hand, it had me on the edge of my seat, and I may or may not have gotten teary-eyed once or twice while watching certain parts. Then, on the other hand, I said to myself after watching this episode, should this have been the end of the show because the storylines that had my interest are mostly wrapped up, or are they? Welcome back, everybody. Today we are here to break down episode 6, the penultimate episode of Taz, which might have the world record for the longest title episode ever. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a river. In this episode, we say goodbye to some important characters as we watch some of the aftermath from one hell of a shootout that opened the first 20 minutes of this show. We see Maeve gets a blessing from the grave, and Tony might not get out of this as clean as he did in the past. We also see that Perry and Jason may have a very uncomfortable conversation coming up soon. We've got so much to talk about in this episode, so let's discuss it all and break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. We pick things up right where we left off. The Dark Hearts get in position and observe Robbie and Tom, who have their guns pointed at each other. Meanwhile, with Tony and Lizzie, Tony sees that Jason didn't listen to him about not coming to this meeting. As we watch the task force close in on Robbie, joining Tom, we see Perry tells the Dark Hearts to stand down and to back off, knowing that the last thing they want is the FBI to get involved in their operations, but impulsive Jason does the opposite as he shoots at Robbie, igniting a full-blown shootout. Now, the distant sounds of the gunfire reaches Tony and Lizzie. Now, in a moment that might just prove his loyalty to Lizzie despite him being the leak, we see him pulling her closer in, letting her know to stay close to him and to basically lock in. This little moment might be the proof that he actually cared about Lizzie's safety and her well-being in this situation. Now, back in the fray, Perry is frustrated with Jason's decision to dive in head first into the chaos. Now, Jason tells Perry that they're not leaving without the drugs, as he splits the Dark Hearts up in half, where half of them move in, while Perry, with a strained expression, orders the others to pull the trucks around for a tactical retreat. Now, to the woods, we find Tom, who isn't exactly a marksman. He's being pursued and shot at by a Dark Hearts member as he stumbles, falling to the ground. But then we see Robbie appears, and instead of taking a shot at Tom, we see Robbie takes out the Dark Heart member, saving Tom's life. Now, Robbie helps Tom up, leading him to his cabin. Now, in the cabin, Tom raises his gun at Robbie, even though he just saved his life. But Robbie knows that he's out of bullets and tells him that he screwed up his plans by not staying at the lake. Now, during this, Perry and Jason are now outside the cabin as Robbie tells Tom to hide as he follows through with his plan. Now, Perry enters the cabin and Tom intervenes by trying to attack him as they get into a fight. Meanwhile, Robbie sees this and Jason takes a shot at him. Jason's out of bullets as Robbie tosses the bag, which we are to believe is the remains of the $1.5 million worth of drugs, into a stream of water. Now, during all this, we see Kathleen takes a bullet to the shoulder. Now, as I predicted a couple weeks ago, we do see Aaliyah stepping up, proving her reputation as a sharpshooter as she takes down 2 Dark Heart members, saving Kathleen's life. Now, Tony and Lizzie head for the car, and their priority now is to call a medic. Now, as they're heading back to the car, Shane sees this and he follows them. Now, as one of the remaining Dark Heart members prepare to take a shot at Lizzie, you see Tony shoves her out of the way, killing him. But in doing so, we see the gunshot deafens Lizzie, causing her hearing to be compromised. Now, Lizzie notices that Tony is now gone, and I think normally she would have backed down at this point, but since she has this romantic interest in him, she gathers herself and goes after him. Now, back to the main event. We're cutting between Jason stabbing Robbie in the side, and while that's happening, Perry gains the upper hand on Tom, reaching for his gun. But in a surge of adrenaline, we see both Tom and Robbie manage to put their oppositions in a headlock. Now, Tom surprisingly musters up enough strength, and honestly, it's most likely anger that he has built up for everything that's going on in his personal life as we watch him knock out Perry. But in another surprising way, he doesn't handcuff Perry as he goes after Robbie. Now, if you were in a situation, if you were Tom, knowing who Perry is and what he's done in the context of being one of the most influential and most important figures in the gang, do you leave him there like Tom did? Or do you handcuff him to something and return to arrest him later? Or do you shoot and kill him, removing this person from the position of the Dark Hearts? Now, getting to the climax of the Robbie and Jason fight. Robbie, with raw, pure rage, is strangling Jason. You can see it in his eyes as he believes he's finally getting his revenge for his brother Billy. Now, Jason is seen taking what I thought was his last breath, but then Robbie's eyes widen. Jason has stabbed him deep in the stomach as Jason moves to finish Robbie as Tom arrives, chasing him off, as we see Tom rushing Robbie to aid. Now, in the middle of all this chaos, we see Tony find Shane, who tells him that if he has to, he will kill Lizzie, but Tony responds by saying if he does anything to her, he'll kill him. Now, to me, Tony and Shane having this conversation in the middle of this gunfire informs us as an audience that Tony has been around various different members of the Dark Hearts. There wasn't just secret meetings between Jason and Tony, and he wasn't just some unknown faceless informant to some of the members of the gang. It makes me wonder if Tony considered some of the members of the Dark Hearts friends or maybe even family. Well, maybe not family because he did just shoot one of them to save Lizzie. But then we have this moment here. We see Lizzie has a gun pointing at Shane as Tony urges her to hold off. Now, by the way Lizzie's holding the gun so close to her chest, you can tell that this is the part of the job that doesn't come natural to her. This is the part of the job that she probably doesn't like when she freezes up, but also remembering that her hearing is severely impaired. Now, she can't fully grasp what Tony is telling her as Shane pretends to lower his weapon, only to ultimately decide to take a shot at Lizzie. As we see, Lizzie beats him to the draw and she shoots him in the chest. This is where Tony's potential friendship comes into play. He rushes to the wounded Shane, implying pressure, and even Lizzie is kind of looking at him like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Now, again, you could say that Tony was trying to save his life because he is a law enforcement and they probably want to get information from Shane. But again, I took that as Tony was trying to save a friend. Now, Tony notices Jason and Perry in the woods and he waves them off to kind of prevent further escalation as Lizzie, still disoriented, runs to the car to call for the medics. Now, the police finally arrive and Tom, in a desperate attempt to save Robbie's life, heads to the hospital with him. Now, Jason and Perry make it to the truck and they're trying to escape, and while that's happening, we see Lizzie reaches the car and calls for backup, and again remembering that her hear loss makes her very vulnerable in this moment. Now, the editing and the sound design here was masterful because it's cutting off the audio to immerse us into Lizzie's position, informing us that she isn't fully aware of her surroundings to what's about to come her way. As Jason and Perry are tearing the road up like bats out of hell, they reach the main bridge. We see Tony and Emilia trying to desperately get the attention of Lizzie to warn her about the speeding truck, but they can't. As Lizzie steps out from the car, we watch the truck with both Jason and Perry sideswipes her. And unfortunately, the impact is brutal and fatal, as Lizzie is dead. Perry and Jason escape as Tony holds her in his arms, telling her that she did a good job as the police arrive and Tony realizes that she's gone. Man, I called it. I knew it was between Tony or Lizzie dying, but unfortunately with Tony having his alliance with the Dark Hearts and guiding Perry and Jason to their truck, it ultimately got Lizzie killed. Meanwhile, in the back of the deputy's car, we watch as Robbie is fading away as he replays the final moments in his head with his kids and Billy and swimming in the quarry, as it looked like he found peace as he slowly fades away and dies. Again, to me, it looked like in that moment that Robbie found his grace in his final moments. Also have to mention that it looked like Tom quietly said a prayer over his body. Again, despite his mistakes, Tom knew Robbie was fundamentally a good guy who unfortunately made some terrible mistakes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the first 18 minutes of this penultimate episode. As we say goodbye to a few random no-name members of the Dark Hearts, including Shane, but more importantly, we say goodbye to Lizzie and Robbie. Now that is how you open an episode, because that was tense as hell. Look, man, shootout sequences can be tough to shoot because of the choreographing of everything and the staging of how this character has to be in this position. You have to make sure it feels believable to the audience and keep the stakes high. Now, admittedly, there were some moments that it felt a little awkward and clunky, like the way that certain characters were holding their gun and how certain characters were moving in the situation. But again, I actually think that that was the point, that none of them are like actual marksmen and are trained assassins. So naturally, it would be a little bit clunky and awkward. And this is probably their first time for some of these characters, like Tom, for example. This is probably his first shootout of his career. And for some of these characters to not be perfect in that position, you felt that sense of tension and anxiety in the moment, especially for characters that we've grown to love. Now again, I figured that Lizzie would most likely die, unfortunately, and looking back at it, this whole time I was thinking Sam's whole thing about the deers would be tied into him, but in reality, if Lizzie was the deer in the literal headlights and was hit by a car on the road and died like the deers that Sam spoke of. Meanwhile, Robbie died maybe underestimating Jason and passionately being so close to strangling him, he didn't realize that Jason still had his knife on him in the heat of the moment, and that cost him his life. Now, later in this episode, we find out exactly what was in the bags, but I'm still not entirely sure what Robbie's plan actually was. I mean, I guess Robbie's plan would have been, let me lure Jason in by pretending I have the drugs. When he gets close enough, I can shoot him, I can kill him, and regardless if I get shot or not, like, I think Robbie was mentally prepared to die in this scenario. But again, I guess he would have killed Jason, he would have died, they would have looked in the bag, and the drugs were gone. Now, at the hospital, Kathleen will be back on her feet soon after a successful surgery. Meanwhile, Lizzie's ex will be gathering her belongings as Tom lets Tony know that it wasn't his fault that she died. But we all know that it was. Now, I do wonder if we'll ever meet Lizzie's husband in the finale. Like, I wonder if he's important in all of the story. I highly doubt it, but I am curious to know if we'll ever actually get to see him or meet him. Now, at the hospital, the task force find out that their assignment is officially over, as two special agents arrive to begin their process in conducting interviews soon for investigations of Lizzie's death because it's protocol. Now, clearly Tony's nervous about these interviews because every interview, every question is a potential step forward to him being exposed. Now, as confirmed later, the investigation part is because of Kathleen's eternal investigation about the leak. Also, I got the impression that Tom was paying attention to both Aaliyah and Tony in this scene, trying to figure out who the leak actually was. Now, back home, Tom shares unfortunate news about Lizzie as Sarah tells Tom about her divorce, which I'm officially divorced from that plot. More on that a little bit later. We see Aaliyah heading back to the HQ to gather her things as she realizes the full weight of the situation. She sees it for what it is, an internal investigation against the task force itself. Now, as she's leaving, she takes a small bullseye Lizzie had made for her, which in my mind is like a final tribute to her colleague that she lost. Now, at Tony's house, he's woken up by his chief, who is here for damage control. He tells Tony that he just recently was interviewed by the FBI Internal Affairs and that it was about Tony. As it looks like, we did have a second leak, and it's Tony's chief, Mike. And now come to think about it, it makes total sense because someone higher up, or in Tony's position, his boss, would have had to have some type of authority or strong influence on how he managed to get his way onto the task force team. Now, they discuss Jason's whereabouts as Tony expresses the raw trauma of holding Lizzie as she died, but Mike tells Tony that he needs to forget about her. Now, Mike's response causes a brief physical exchange between the two as we watch Mike strangely dump Tony's head into the sink and washes his hair. That was so weird to me. Maybe, I don't know, maybe in his head and maybe in the show's head, it's you need to cool down, kid. Literally, cool your head. Cool heads prevail. But anyway, we see him telling Tony the next steps, and we see him telling him to keep his head in the game like last time, basically inferring that they've done this before. Now, I could be mistaken, but I think we're headed to a situation where we're going to learn in the finale that Tony may not have been a willing participant in the Dark Heart schemes, but he was a compromised asset. Perhaps Mike covered up for him in the past for a past mistake, and maybe Tony is being blackmailed. Whatever the reason, Tony seemed to be trapped and again maybe forced to be the insider, and his boss is the one applying all the pressure. Or Tony was willing to do what the Dark Hearts wanted him to do, and things just got worse over time. I'm thinking about last week when he told Jason, this is not good. We've gotten things out of hand. This isn't like last time. And we know this time around he was also emotionally attached to Lizzie, which now has him questioning his alliance with the gang. Now, at the station, Tom informs Maeve of Robbie's death and that Jason was responsible. Now, no one knows that Cliff is dead at this point, so we see Tom asking Maeve if she knows his whereabouts, which obviously she doesn't, as it's here that Tom learns about how Cliff and Robbie were sent to the wrong park during the ambush. Now, last week, I had wondered if Tom remembered Maeve from her hiding Sam in the trunk episode. Well, he did, as he brings it up in this conversation. Now, Tom reveals that he remembers her from that night, and Maeve admits that she knew she was wrong, but she did it because she was afraid that if she got caught with Sam, it would have meant that she would have been leaving Harper and Wyatt alone, as we can see that Tom is sympathetic to her situation. Behind the scenes, we see Tom talking to a DA about Maeve's chances in court and her involvement in the kidnapping of Sam. Tom shares his opinion on the matter, understanding that she was thrown into this situation by her uncle Robbie. This isn't just compassion that we're seeing here from Tom. This is Tom honoring his word to Robbie to protect his family from the fallout of his mistakes. Now, speaking of Sam, we see Tom visiting him in a juvenile detention facility. In a full circle moment, Tom acknowledges the tragedy that Sam has recently faced. Now, I don't know the legal side of how this would have worked out because of Tom's involvement in the case, but ultimately we see Tom taking Sam home. Now, I don't think Tom sees this situation as him replacing his son Ethan, but I believe Tom looks at this as a new chance of helping out another kid in need and to find a better situation, and this being like an unexpected path for Tom to healing and fatherhood. Meanwhile, we cut back to Tom's house where the boy from Emily's work invites her to a magic show. During this, Sarah's husband is there picking up their child as we see Sarah crying and Emily hugs her sister. I hate to sound like a broken record, but the whole Emily, Sarah, and hell, even throwing Ethan to the equation, all of that to me seems like it's in a completely different show. Don't get me wrong, I get the purpose of these characters and their stories, obviously how it affects Tom, and this being like a broken family. It's all about that situation, and we also learn how that parallels with Robbie's personal relationships, but I'm just being honest. Every single time that we cut to them, it feels like a commercial break in the middle of a show. And again, that's no disrespect to the acting and to the meat and potatoes of the emotional gravity that they're bringing to the show. It's just the most uninteresting part of the show for me. But hey, let me know your thoughts on this situation and when we cut to them in the comments below. Now, I'm not going to lie to you all. I got a little teary-eyed about this next scene. As we cut to Maeve returning home. She's met by Harper and Wyatt, who know that their father is dead. Now, it's not clear or blatantly said if Maeve is 100% in the clear or if she's currently out on bail, but it seemed like Tom's opinion on her involvement got her off the hook and Tom kept his promise to protect her. Now, the reason I said I got emotional is because I thought about the last scene between Robbie and Harper in the kitchen when they shared a dance. Robbie knew that this was a goodbye to his little girl, but she had no idea. Also, seeing little Harper crying really kind of got to me, and also thinking about the fact that these kids had their mom leave them and now their dad is dead. Now, back at home, Tom introduces Sam to Sarah and Emily, who immediately talk to Tom about his decision considering everything going on with Ethan's case. Now, this kitchen scene injected some much-needed levity into this rather sad episode, as we see Emily sticking up for her big sister, and maybe my favorite line in this episode.
Now, does anyone else want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Now we see Sam with his new Batman toy that I believe Tom probably gifted him on his way home as he finds a safe place in Ethan's bed, asking Tom to stay with him until he falls asleep. It's a tender moment, and now I believe it's safe to assume that Sam is safe, but is he truly safe? The whole deer foreshadowing, which we discussed earlier, appeared to be fulfilled by Lizzie's tragic death, but what if after Tom's later confrontation with Tony, our crooked detective decides to cover his tracks by sending Tom's home information to the Dark Hearts? Now, I don't know if Tony knows who's in and out of Tom's house, but if he does send the Dark Hearts there, this would plunge not just Tom and his family, but now Sam into peril. Now, shifting gears, we check in with Kathleen recovering from her injuries. It's here we can officially confirm that Kathleen initiated the investigation into the task force itself. Now, this puts the rest of the lingering suspicions that some of you all still had about her potentially being a leak. Now, it's also here that Tom learns about what was found on Tony back in 2021.
Grasso was part of a task force with this other officer who thought he might be tipping off the gangs. Every time the strike force showed up to raid a house, the drugs were in the wind. You want to guess which gang they were investigating?
Dark Hearts.
Ding, ding, ding.
Now, this explains Tony's chief, Mike, earlier in the episode, talking about following orders like last time, as we see Tom is rightfully pissed off that this information was withheld from him before he joined the task force. As he also finds out that Jason and Perry remain at large, as their capture is still a #1 priority. Now, speaking of Jason and Perry, we find them held up in a safe house in the middle of nowhere, hoping to find the bag that Robbie threw in the river. Now, while Perry is fishing, we see Jason's anxiety is high as he calls Donna's to speak to one of the members of the Dark Hearts, only to learn that no one has heard from Aaron. It's in this scene that we witness a crack in Jason's hardened exterior. His emotional distress over his wife's disappearance seems genuine, revealing he's a man deeply worried about the mother of his children who would never abandon them for this long. Now, the question is, will Perry finally confess what happened to Aaron to Jason? Now, keep in mind, only Robbie and Cliff knew about her involvement in the robberies, or at least setting the robberies up, and they're now dead. However, if Donna had any inkling of Aaron's true activities, her knowledge can be important. Now, I've always had a feeling that Donna knew what Aaron was up to, and I could see a situation where Perry might confess what he did to Aaron to Donna, and if Donna was aware of what Aaron was up to, maybe she was in on it, and with now this information, she would maybe share it with Jason to finish what Aaron started by tearing up the gang from within. And it's also important to remember, because it wasn't brought up in this episode, that Jason's deadline to be taken out has already happened. So again, will Perry turn in his son / best friend / brother, or will he continue to protect him? And just backtracking a bit, if Jason does find out about what Perry did to his wife, will Perry say, listen, she was an informant, she was a leak, she was screwing us over, I had to do what I had to do, or, he says it was an accident? What's Jason's response? Does he respond with anger? Does he understand? Does he try to kill Perry? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Now, another highlight of this episode for me happens here as we come to an end of this episode as Tom visits Tony's house. Tom is now armed with the information from Maeve about the park situation. He also now has footage from the park of that night, and Tom also brings up Tony's 2021 investigation that ties him into the Dark Hearts. Now, it's here we see Tony kind of pivoting the conversation as he asks Tom about his time as a priest and his experience with confessionals.
Priest gives you your penance, and you get on your knees, and you say your Hail Marys and your Our Fathers. And then what?
Tom believes Tony did indeed tip off the Dark Hearts, but with no evidence, it's just hearsay as Tom tells him that he's going to be coming for him and Tony tells him to come. This scene was just damn near perfect. The performances, the tension was just so excellent between the two, and it actually makes me rethink about all the previous conversations earlier in the season between these two characters. Thinking about all those scenes they shared in the car and them talking about God and religion, in a way, without Tom realizing it, Tony was seeking absolution, asking if forgiveness for his association with the Dark Hearts was even possible. Again, this scene forces us to revisit all of Tony's previous conversations, especially thinking about that bar scene with Lizzie where he spoke about other crooked cops, and thinking about his hesitation when hooking up with her that night and him not wanting to get close with her, knowing the compromises he's already made. It really does paint this picture of a man wrestling with his conscience even as he digs himself deeper. Now we see Tom waste no time updating Emilia on the leak situation and Tony's compromised past, as we see them both set their sights on proving his insidious connection to the Dark Hearts. Now, the episode's closing moments offer a complex blend of closure and a new wrinkle to the story. We see Perry and Jason locate Robbie's bag that he threw in the water, only to find it filled with magazines about Canada, the very ones Robbie showed Cliff in episode 1. At the same time, Maeve receives a knock at the door. It's Shelley delivering a bag filled with drug money that is roughly worth $1.5 million. And I also bet, Robbie being the good guy that he was, I bet he gave her enough money to assure that Ray will never find her again. This appears to be Robbie's secret plan that he worked out with Freddie. He gave him the drugs in exchange for the money that Maeve now has in her possession. Now, I would assume that we will see the consequences of the situation if Perry and Jason learn that Freddie struck a deal with Robbie. The final shot of Robbie and the quarry staring into the distance with a subtle knowing smile is bittersweet. Another tear hit the corner of my eye at seeing Robbie, knowing that yes, Maeve and his children will forever be changed by his decision to do what he did, but despite his flaws, he did assure that they have been taken care of. But the question is this the last time we'll see Maeve and the kids in this story? Has their arc found its bittersweet conclusion? So this is and was a very interesting episode, and I'm not sure how to feel about it. We open with that very tense shootout and see the death of Lizzie and Robbie, and we all were on this emotional high, and then the rest of the episode shows the rest of the fallout. Yet then it pivots and cuts from scenes of domestic levity with Sam and the developing marital strains between Sarah and what's going on with Emily. We have Maeve, who has her closure in a sense. And of course, we have the continued saga of Perry and Jason, and of course, Tom's confrontation with Tony. To me, the pacing created a somewhat disjointed experience. While the individual parts were often excellent, the sum didn't quite achieve the seamless flow of the previous episodes. By the end, I found myself wondering if this had functioned as a season finale of its own right, tying up all the several major threads. Now, yes, we still need to know if Perry confesses to Jason about Aaron and if they'll even get caught and what will come of Ethan's case and, of course, Tony being taken down. But I must confess, I've mentally prepared myself to believing that this penultimate episode, episode 6, to be the true conclusion to the plots that had the most interesting elements to me. And then that makes the actual finale potentially serving up as more of a prolonged epilogue. Now look, I can be proven wrong and the finale delivers in ways I couldn't have possibly imagined, but hey, we'll find out next week. Regardless, I still feel like episode 6 was an important installment of this series, obviously, and it peeled back layers of deception and personal struggle, and it hopefully sets up a stage for a promising and deeply impactful finale of the story. So, with all that said, I think I've said everything I had to about this episode, which brings us to an end of my breakdown of episode 6 of Task. It is now time for me to hear you all's thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what you thought about everything we discussed, from the death of Robbie and Lizzie, what will come of Perry and Jason, is Maeve and the kids and Sam safe, and what's the perfect ending in your mind to this series and the finale? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Now, if you all have made it to this point in the breakdown, I thank you so much. I know this was a longer video, but I just had so much to say. And again, it is the penultimate episode, so a lot to break down. But regardless, I thank you all for the continued support. Do me a favor, put in the comments right now, hashtag RIP Rob and Liz. Thank you all for watching or listening to my breakdown. If you all are watching this on YouTube, please do me a favor, hit that thumbs up. And when you do that, there's going to be a hype button that pops up on YouTube. And if you all hit that hype button, it really helps out the video. Now, if you all can do me another favor, hit the share button. Share this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show as much as we do. And last but not least, consider subscribing to my channel for task breakdowns and so much more. Now, if you all are listening to this in podcast, I appreciate you all. Do me a favor, leave your thoughts in the comments, leave a review for the podcast, and also consider following the podcast. I appreciate all the support. Alrighty, y'all, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I will see you all next week for my breakdown of episode 7, the series finale of Task.